favorable or positive verdict on Ghana's performance under the program. Does your scorecard reflect same sentiment as the IMF is making us believe?
Good evening, and good evening to listeners. Thanks for having me. So, indeed, there was an expectation that at the end of the first review, the IMF team will agree that Ghana has made the required progress. And essentially, that is the key thing that the press conference revealed today. It's one of the key things. I think beyond that, the communication that the economy has turned a corner. It's not the first time we've heard that communication. The finance minister said that it was a big part of his mid-year budget review and the discussion that has followed. Now, if you look at the macroeconomic indicators, the broader macroeconomic indicators, it will not escape you that there's been improvement from whether it's inflation or the currency or the reserve position. You do see that there's been improvement. I think I will hesitate to say we've turned the corner the way it's being put out. I think it's clear that there's been some stability. But, we have to understand, if you take them case by case, you see that we probably need to see some more sustained improvement before we can start saying we've turned the corner. If you look at the currency which perhaps has seen the strongest stability since the program has started, you see it's true that since February or maybe January, the currency has been relatively stable, but we have to be mindful that a big part of that is that we are not paying the foreign debts, we are not servicing the foreign debts that we are supposed to because of the suspension. So that is that. I'm not sure that if we move that part away, the currency will be what it is. The growth has been a little stronger. The first 2 quarters have been stronger than it was anticipated, so that is good. But again, it's still hovering around the 2022 level, and we all agree that 2022 was a terrible year for the Ghanaian economy. Then when you look at the inflation rate, yes, it has lowered since the recent peak in December 2022, but we are still hovering around 40%, and it's still historically high. So in terms of direction, things are moving in the direction that we want, but I think if you start to read too much into it and say the economy has turned the corner, I think it's a little bit of a stretch. A different way of looking at it is, if you look at the measures that we have had to undertake for the IMF to pass this first review, these are measures that are very tough for Ghanaian businesses and Ghanaian households. So yes, they have been done to make government and the broader macroeconomy look good, as if we are heading in the right direction. But I think that many Ghanaian businesses will tell you that things having improved, the business environment hasn't been as good as it could have been because we've had to impose a lot of taxes, and there's been a lot of fiscal tightening by way of collecting more revenues. All of these are really biting ordinary Ghanaian businesses and households. So if you look at the macroeconomic indicators, there's been some stability, but what we have done to get that stability is really hurting ordinary Ghanaian households and businesses.
Yeah, very well. I mean, very well. Let's deal with them, into some more detail. You talk about the stability of the cedi, the exchange rate primarily, and indeed, you made a point that when you look at it on the face of it, there's some stability, but that stability has been occasioned by the fact that we are no more, or we suspended the servicing of our debt. So why would the IMF and the governor and the finance minister, knowing so well that this is the cause of the supposed stability, still go ahead and be touting that the cedi appears more stable now, when we know that debt servicing was a huge part of the problem? and we don't do that anymore, at least for now?
Well, I mean, so I think when we put the IMF program together, we put benchmarks and indicators. And it doesn't matter whether we are doing firefighting to get the benchmarks within the level required. It will still count. So, I mean, and don't forget the IMF team and the government, the finance minister, and to some extent the government, you understand why they'll be quick to talk up the economy, because they want to show, the IMF team want to show they made the right decision by all the backward bending to help Ghana get through the program. And the government team also want to show that things are moving in the right direction. So yes, you understand why they will do that, but I think it wouldn't be lost on them that if all those factors will move away, perhaps we wouldn't be where, I mean, the city wouldn't be as strong as we think it is.
I see. The issue about inflation itself, it's not been very consistent in its fall. It's been vacillating. The amount it goes up, the amount it inches down. And so I'm not sure if, of course, we've seen quite some drop from the 54% we saw in December, 53% or so in January. Now we are somewhere around the 40s, which is also high, but way better than what we saw in the beginning of the year. Will it be enough to say that we've seen a consistent decline when indeed somewhere around the middle it's not really been consistent with up and down?
Definitely not a consistent decline. Don't forget that at the beginning of the year, the first 3 quarters, we saw the inflation drop in each of those months. And we were beginning to think that we are finally on a sustained path of disinflation, only to see about 3 consecutive months of increases. I think, so yes, we are lower than where we were in December, but you really want to see a consistent deceleration of the rate of inflation, that is disinflation, before you begin to say, and also if you break them down, I think, yes, food inflation, the way food inflation is going, it still tells us that there are still problems. And yet we might look at the overall picture and say things are coming down, but if you begin to look at the disaggregated number, you know that there are some problems. And we know the food inflation is not something that we are going to solve with only monetary policy or over a short period of time. We need to make sustained investment in food production, but also food distribution. And we know we haven't made those investments. So yes, for now, the monetary policy, the policy rate hikes and other things seem to be bringing down the inflation. But we know that we can't just bring down the inflation the way we want with the current things that we are doing. So it's clear. So yes, so like I said, the broader number tells you the trend is probably lower than, it's heading down from where we started the year. But we shouldn't deceive ourselves at all.
Very well. So the IMF also tells us that this staff level agreement is subject to the management approval and executive board consideration once the necessary financial assurances have been received. So what really can hamper the receipt of these assurances? What can happen for us not to get the assurances that will trigger the release of the next tranche of $600 million?
Well, it's a negotiation. We are negotiating with sovereign partners and some private international private lenders who have lent us money. So, it's not something that depends only on the government of Ghana. You get the sense that there's been a general expression of support, but that is all well and good. We have to put things on paper. At present, you get a sense that all the signs point to a direction of getting those agreement done, but it is only done when we have something on paper. And at the moment, we don't have it. I don't immediately see anything on the horizon that will prevent that from happening. We do see that there's commitment to make an agreement, but we still have to get it done before we say that we are over the hump.
They also say they want an agreement. Of course, they want an agreement from official creditors on debt treatment, like we've been saying. Who are these official creditors? And also, I also thought that some consent or agreement of a kind was secured in May before we got a release of the first tranche. So how different would this one be?
So that was financing assurances that they will be willing to engage, they will be willing to support and commit, that some form of restructuring, some form of agreement will be done to ensure that Ghana, to contribute what they can to make sure Ghana's debt is sustainable. Now, but even at that, we knew that the specifics of what kind of debt forgiveness that will be given us has not been done. So that is the part that has to be agreed by way of the official creditors. Yes, they've agreed in broad principle that, and that was the financing assurances we got earlier before the IMF program was approved. But the specifics of how much debt treatment, how much debt relief, whether it's forgiveness or reduction in interest payment or delaying the amount of time or that we have to repay, all of those have not been agreed yet. So those specifics are the ones that we have to agree before is the one that has been referred to here.
I see. So finally, will you say that indeed our performance under the fund has been compelling, as the fund wants to, is trying to make us believe?
If you look at what we put down by way of structural benchmark and the period, the short period with which we've had to do these really painful measures, you understand why the fund will be impressed with the performance. But it has come at a cost, because we all see the protests that are ongoing, and we all see the complaints that Ghanaian businesses are suffering. And even though the Bank of Ghana says that sentiments have improved, I think the business sentiment and consumer confidence are still relatively weak. So yes, for a country to be able to take these kind of very stiff measures in a short period of time is quite amazing. But this is imposing hardship on Ghanaians, because we've been doing more DDEP and we are paying more. We are quickly adjusting utility prices so that Ghanaians are paying. All of these, and then if you impose more taxes, all of these are the ones that are going to help bring the fiscal deficit down by 4 percentage points over one budget cycle. That is quite extraordinary. So yes, in terms of the paper language, in terms of what you've done achieving those targets, it looks quite impressive. But the underlying thing is that it means that we have imposed more hardship on Ghanaians.
I see. Thanks so much, Dr. Patrick Esumi, an economist, speaking to us on the matter of the IMF's staff level agreement reached with Ghana